You are now entering Nick and Mello's hyperspace.
Hello, my name is Carmelo, and my two top favorite characters of Phantom Menace are Darth Maul and Queen Amidala. They're very different, but they're both really wonderful.
And I'm Nick, and my two favorite characters from The Phantom Menace are Qui-Gon Jinn and also Queen Amidala, who I find very fascinating.
In our journeys through hyperspace, we examine everything and anything Star Wars from the point of view of two lifelong fans, one young, one old, who came together through the will of the Force.
And in this episode, we're going to celebrate the 25-year anniversary of The Phantom Menace. Here
I'm
we are.
feeling so old right now.
Here we are 25 years later. The world's still standing as of now, and it didn't destroy the fandom. We're still here. We're still getting Star Wars
That's
things.
true. That's true. And it is really interesting that you say that because there's a lot of sort of prequel trilogy lore that is being used in many of the television shows and animated shows that are being produced right now. So it's really interesting to see how that is sort of feeding into the
Mhm.
new narratives. And it's really interesting because watching it again, just talking generally about the movie, it's still fun. Like it doesn't feel like, oh dear.
Yeah,
There's so much to it. There are so many things about it. And it is really interesting that it's sort of the beginning of really truly thinking about politics in Star Wars.
that's true. That's true.
We see the Senate for the first time. We see Coruscant for the first time. There are all of these things in the movie that are sort of bringing us into what later will develop in Clone Wars and will develop in the novels to the kind of detail that we have now about sort of history, politics, and Star Wars.
For many years, I think a lot of people put this movie towards the bottom of their list, but I feel like maybe the last 5, 6 years, I feel like this movie's gotten a lot of love. Still some people have complaints about it. We have a few of our own, but
Yeah, we do.
that's par for the course for almost any Star Wars movie or
Right,
TV show.
right, right.
But I will say, and I think you told me, Joseph, your husband, he said this is his favorite prequel
It
movie.
is. It
And I,
is.
I think I have to agree with Joseph here. I think this is my favorite prequel movie. I just find it very fun. I feel like I could always have this one on. It's one of those that I could always revisit, and I just have a good time watching it.
It's one that my students in my class enjoy a lot, the ones that have never seen the movies. When they see it, they're sort of tickled by it. And I think it has so many of the by that time the typical Star Wars elements,
Mm.
sort of the multiplicity of species, the battles, the lightsaber duels. There's just so many elements that are sort of very typical of what Star Wars was in the original trilogy, and that are replicated in the movie, and that's really fun. And the other really wonderful thing is that women start being a lot more present
Yes,
in the story of Star Wars because Leia was pretty lonely in the original trilogy. Mon
hmm
Mothma shows up for
a
what
scene.
what my students call it, a hot second, a hot minute.
If that,
But in the prequel trilogy, we start getting more and more women. We'll see more in the other films. And I remember when I was writing the book, this is the first movie with a female pilot.
yes, it is.
In the original trilogy, they were all men. And this is the first one that we have. We only have one in this movie, but hey, at least we have
It's a
one.
start.
We begin with one female pilot, and then we have lots and lots and lots and lots of them. And of course, the lightsaber duel, which after I saw it this week again, I'm like, wow, is this my favorite lightsaber duel? It's really getting up there.
It's
It's
very
really
awesome.
getting up there. It's just the artistry and the movement. I'm a dancer by training, and so looking at these three men move,
Especially,
I'm having little dance orgasms watching them. It's just beautiful, just
I,
beautiful.
I always found it interesting, especially the way Maul moves. He's very menacing and aggressive, but he's also very like elegant and quick on his feet, and it's very nice kinetic movement that you don't really see a lot in Star Wars. It's
I don't know that I can do it because I guess if there's a moment where he's sort of extending his arm while he's turning, while he's flipping, and
mhm.
he's using his arm as a counterbalance. Oh my goodness!
Yeah,
I want that as a TikTok video because it was
yeah.
just so beautiful. So beautiful. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it is definitely up there, top three,
It
probably
might
even top two.
it might have the most significant impact in all of Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
It might
Oh
have
yeah, because it triggers the story.
triggers the story,
It
triggers the chain
triggers
of
the story.
events
Yeah, 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 yeah.
that we'll see play out later, and it
Absolutely.
affects multiple relationships and family origins and all kinds of stuff. So
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, no, no.
it's
I
a very
mean,
important one.
it is also like a hinge for
Yeah.
all of these things that are going to happen later. So were you alive
Yes, I was
when
alive
this
when
came
they.
out?
I was alive. Yes, I'm not that young.
So tell me about your sort of your first memories of the movie.
So I think I saw this movie years after it came out. I was 4 years old. I don't even think I was 4 years old yet when this movie came out. I was about three.
Okay, because it came out in
Uh,
May
yeah, my
of
birthday is in June, so I was
okay,
about almost 4 years old,
almost four.
almost four. And I didn't go to the theater to see it at that point. I don't know if I'd really been to a movie at that point as a young one.
Did your
Uh,
family like did you have older brothers? Did they go see
I'm
it?
the oldest, so
You are
no,
the oldest. Okay,
I'm the
never mind.
oldest, and
Never mind.
I had an older cousin, but he wasn't really into things like Star Wars
Okay,
or superheroes or anything like that. So,
okay.
um, yeah, I didn't really get into Star Wars until I was almost a teenager. But
Oh wow.
so my memory, really started when I was a toddler, probably Christmas. I would assume the Christmas before it actually came out, is what I'm assuming. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, I just remember at my grandparents' house, maybe Christmas, Thanksgiving, holiday time. I remember a lot of family was there, and they played a commercial for Phantom Menace as trailer.
Oh.
And I remember bits and pieces. I remember seeing R2D2. I remember seeing, a hooded figure, which we know would be Darth Maul, and seeing all kinds of just flashing images and stuff going on. I had no idea what the heck this was. But my family, I remember them being like, "Wow, Star Wars is coming back."
Hmm.
Who would have ever thought? One of my first memory, actually, probably my first memory of Star Wars at all, and learning what it is was because of this movie. So,
I was, of course, an adult in 98, 99. Actually, I
see,
was just starting. How fascinating. That was my first year at Columbia College, 98, 99. So
okay,
I had finally moved back to Chicago and I had a job here.
interesting.
And I remember going to see movies at the movie theaters because I knew the trailer was attached to that movie.
Hmm.
And I saw that trailer so many
Because this
times.
is years before YouTube, and we could just watch it on our
Oh,
phones
there was
or
no internet.
right,
I mean, there was internet, but it was very
not like it
primitive.
is. Yeah,
Certainly not what we have now. So you couldn't go online.
just
Online was not advanced enough for you to watch a trailer.
right.
So you needed to see them either on television, and we had no television in our house because we didn't watch TV. And the only place I could watch them was at the movies.
The movie theater.
So
Yeah.
I would go to the movies, and so I would just watch them there. And there are so many shots. I remember the explosion inside the Trade Federation ship that is caused by Annie, by little
Mhm.
Annie, was one of the images that shows up in the trailer, and
Mm.
it was just incredible. It was just incredible. I was so excited, being a huge fan of the original trilogy, and then after 1983 we got nothing. And
Mm.
there was the Droids animated show and the Ewoks animated show, which I was in college when that was happening, so I was not watching them.
Yeah.
So this was my first visual comeback to Star Wars, and it was just thoroughly
Yeah.
exciting for me.
That does sound like a fun time.
I
And
saw I saw Phantom Menace 11 times at the movies.
wow.
At
I
the movies.
I've seen like old clips of like newscasts and things like that. People being like, I've waited 2 days to get tickets to the movie. People camping out in long lines.
Mhm.
I remember all kinds of like old clips of that, and um, what a time that was! Really, like I said, like we said, now if the movie came out now, and we'd be having to, order the tickets on our phone and all kinds of stuff are on
Oh
our
no, you got to
laptops. And
stand in line. Yeah,
now
yeah,
back
yeah.
then you had to do it the old fashioned way and
Absolutely. The
be
other
be lucky.
thing, yeah, yeah, yeah. The other thing is that it is around Phantom Menace that Star Wars Celebration begins.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
And so the very first Star Wars Celebration is in Denver, Colorado, and it is sort of to create hype for the coming of these movies. And
Okay.
so Star Wars Celebration is sort of connected to the beginning of the prequel trilogy.
So the celebration started, I guess, you said before the movie came out.
Yeah, so Star Wars Celebration, the very first one, which was in Denver, was at the end of April, beginning of May of 1999. So literally
Oh
like
wow,
three
weeks.
weeks before
Yeah,
3 weeks before the movie was going to be released, and it was sort of added to the hype of
that's
the
really
film.
neat. I had
I
no
have a
idea.
I have a student, not a former student, he's not a student anymore, who actually went to that one because he was living in Denver with his mom. He barely knew what Star Wars was, but she knew what Star Wars was.
Hmm.
And she said, "This is an opportunity of a lifetime. Like, when is this going to happen again in Denver?" And so he was there. He barely remembers. I think he was like 7 or 8 when this
Wow,
happened, but he was there. He was
that's
really
cool.
there. So it is really interesting how Phantom Menace is the beginning of many things,
Yeah,
including Star Wars Celebration.
opened up a whole new pathway of all kinds of
Absolutely,
things, all sorts of
absolutely.
things.
So shall we talk about these characters that we like so
Yeah,
much?
yeah, yeah. The two characters I said were my favorite were I can't decide, always go back and forth, but Qui-Gon and then the Queen Amidala. I think I just enjoy Qui-Gon's. He's stoic, but he's not like emotionless. I guess I could see that he cares. He's
Mm,
passionate.
mm,
I can see he feels like the council is not. They may think logically, but they don't think the damage they've done emotionally to people or things like that. And then that's been filled in later through ancillary media.
right.
But I just enjoy his kind of a little bit of a rebellious nature, but
Mhm,
it's
mhm.
one of those rebellious natures where, um, you know, he thinks that the Jedi, you could kind of the seeds are kind of planted where he believes the Jedi have kind of strayed away from what they really are, and I just think he's fascinating, and it's unfortunate. I understand the reason why he had to die, but would have loved to seen his point of view throughout the Clone Wars and
Mm.
later on, but always fascinating. And for a character that's only in one movie, I think he probably might be the most one of the most important characters in all of Star Wars. I
And
think.
he's very memorable. He's very
Yeah,
memorable. Yeah, 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 yeah.
he's got a very intelligent things to say, very wise quotes.
Mhm.
I mean, he's awesome.
There's a series of novels that were published around Phantom Menace called Jedi Apprentice, Star Wars Jedi
Mm,
Apprentice
you've told
by
me about
the
these.
Jude Watson,
Yes.
and it is about the relationship between Qui-Gon and Kenobi when Kenobi is a very young kid, and it is the beginning of their relationship. And those books are amazing for the sort of characterization of Qui-Gon.
Yeah.
And there's like, Qui-Gon falls in love with the Jedi. There's just all of these amazing things that happen to him in that story. And so it's really wonderful to have, really fascinating, Nick, to know those books and watch this movie.
Hmm.
And so having the background of that character and seeing all the little kernels, all the little sort of like little things that will later writers develop, so we can know more. As you say, he only shows up in this movie, to get more of Qui-Gon, more of the
Hmm.
story, which is really wonderful. You talked about him and his Jedi, and his relationship with the Order. It's really fascinating to see him here almost as an outsider.
Hmm.
He's not part of the council. um Obi-Wan is constantly telling us, like, if you didn't keep breaking the rules, you might be in the council by now.
True.
And so it's really interesting to see a man who believes in the Jedi ethics but is impatient about the Jedi Order.
Mm.
And so that I find really, really, really interesting. And you and I have read and have loved and have talked about Master and Apprentice, the Claudia Gray
Oh,
novel.
it's an excellent novel.
Um, and so it's really interesting to see, it's really interesting to have read that novel and this week watch Phantom Menace again, and being able to see once again all of these little moments in the film that are sort of extrapolated and expanded in the novel.
Hmm.
And so I love when fiction helps us understand a character better that we already knew in the film. So when you go back to the film, you're informed by a fuller understanding of that character. It's one of the
Hmm.
things that I love about changing media in Star Wars, because
Yeah.
we find other ways of telling the story and
I
knowing more
felt,
about the
and yeah,
characters.
it's a good way to fill in the gaps and learn more about these characters when you
Yes,
can only do so much in a 2 hour movie.
of course, of
But a
course.
novel, you can it's almost limitless what you can do with the possibilities.
And Amidala, tell me about Amidala.
Amidala, yeah.
because
like
she's also in my top two, as you heard.
yeah. I will. You and I were talking or before we recorded, and you said, really, this is where women start to play an active role in Star Wars, and this is I believe she's what 14, 15 years old in this
I think
movie.
younger than that. She's like 12 or
Okay,
13.
yeah, very young,
Yeah.
and a queen of the planet, a ruler, cares for her people. We know Leia's a great leader, and we get to see her in the original trilogy, but we really don't get to see her interact with the people of her planet because obviously it's gone. Um,
Mhm.
but we really get to see Amidala and kind of making big decisions that's going to affect people of her own world and trying to fit into this larger galaxy. It's just fascinating. The reveal of the switch.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people are saying it's pretty obvious. And rewatching the movie, there's a couple lines where Padme goes off with Qui-Gon, and I noticed she says some comments. I'm like, oh, he said, there's one where he said,
The queen must trust my judgment.
yeah, and she said, well, I don't, or something like that.
Right, right,
And then
right.
when we get the reveal later, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
that makes more sense.
I noticed in this time that they actually used the voice of Natalie Portman when a handmaiden is impersonating her. Keira Knightley, who is one of the handmaidens in the film, who later becomes a famous actress, when she is being the queen, the voice that we hear is actually Natalie Portman's voice.
Oh.
And it's really interesting because in the E.K. Johnston novels, there are extensive parts where they are training the voice,
Mm-hmm.
so they
And
sound like Padme Amidala when they are impersonating the queen.
yes.
And so that's coming from the movie where they're actually using the voice of Natalie Portman for when they
Well,
impersonate Amidala.
those series of novels too are really good about explaining how the handmaidens work.
I love those
Those
novels.
novels are incredible.
Yes.
They explain how the handmaidens.
Audience, if you don't know about these and you want to know more, we have an episode in season 2 all
Yes,
dedicated to those 3 novels. So
we
you
did.
should check it
Definitely
out.
check that out.
Check it out.
Yeah, those novels do great and to go into detail about how the handmaids operate. Each of them have a specific kind of skill or talent they're good at. They all kind of learn each other's, try to fit the same mannerisms and
Mhm,
postures, and this
mhm.
is really fascinating. And they're in the movie, they're just background characters who I don't think really have any speaking lines, but
Right.
reading those novels and knowing the training and the what they overcame and how they became a unit. It's very fascinating to see them kind of operate in the background,
Yep.
and I always look for them in the back, see what they're doing, and they're very good. It's
Yeah, yeah, those
very deceptive.
absolutely. They're those are wonderful novels. I think I've read the first one 3 times now. And they're just magnificent. I love Amidala, wow, in this movie for so many reasons. Number one, the gay man in me is totally in love with all the costumes, the costume changes.
They're
It's
incredible.
just like this woman breathes fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really quite wonderful. And it's really, really nice. When I was getting ready for this recording, I was like, I don't have any prequel trilogy t-shirts. And my husband Joseph said, just wear a kimono because there's so much of Japanese fashion in
Yeah,
Amidala.
so much.
I didn't. I wore this one, but it's really interesting that it's fun to see the language of fashion from so many parts of our world sort of
Influenced.
inserted and transformed
Yeah.
in Amidala. There's one that has sort of a Mongolian feel, another one has a Japanese feel, and so it's really, really interesting to see how the idea of fashion, and this is something that I talk about in my book, the idea of fashion is part of the spectacle of Star Wars. And in this movie, it really becomes part of the spectacle of Star Wars. It's not just battleships. It's not just species. It's not just special effects. It's also fashion itself.
Mm-hmm.
Also fashion itself. So that's really, really quite fun. Um, Maul.
Yeah. Look,
I
I'm curious.
he barely shows up in this movie,
Mhm.
but I find him so intriguing because there's so little of him.
Mm.
And I remember when I first saw this movie, he was the character that fascinated me the most because we knew nothing about him. We didn't know where he came from. We didn't know anything about him. He's a Sith. He is the apprentice of Lord Sidious, and so I find him so intriguing. And as we talked about with the lightsaber duel, that's where he shows off in a sort of magnificent way. In my Star Wars class, we talk about trying to identify Darth Maulness, sort of like what makes Darth Maul visually, narratively, and it just really, I find it really interesting how there is so little about him, so we become more and more fascinated, at least I do, more and more fascinated by him. Like you mentioned with Qui-Gon, and you mentioned with Amidala, knowing what happens to Maul after this makes it even more fascinating to see that moment where he is just the apprentice of Lord Sidious. And then we get the whole story in Clone Wars, the whole story in Rebels, about what happens to him after. There's also a series of comics that are sort of connected to the moments before this film. So it's really interesting to sort of once again see Phantom Menace knowing what we know.
I always said he was the Boba Fett of the prequel trilogy.
He is. Oh, totally.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
we get more
Yes,
of him later, but
that's
yeah,
exactly right. That
when you
is
told
exactly right.
when you
He
told me
is the
that
Boba Fett of the prequel trilogy. Yeah.
when you told me that he was one of your favorites, I was always confused because I love Clone Wars and Rebels Maul. I love him. He's
Oh,
incredible.
he's great.
In this movie, I've never really I like him, but
Oh,
I don't get the
he's
appeal in this movie. I later on for me is when I really get to enjoy Maul. I mean, he's menacing and he's frightening and he's very formidable opponent, but to me, he feels more just kind of there instead of an active part of the plot. But no, he's great. He looks great, and
yeah.
the voice, even though he barely speaks, is very, I don't know how to describe it. It's chilling,
Yeah.
not in a it's a terrifying I'm going to hurt you voice, but also a not like a Vader where it's loud and it takes over the whole scene, but it's more of a quiet serial killer.
Yeah. It's really interesting because I think the less he says, the more I become intrigued by him.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we had more lines of him, he might have become less interesting. But
Mm-hmm.
I think your comparison with Boba Fett in the original trilogy is spot on because we know so little that and he's really interesting because he's so mysterious we can't even fill in the blanks. Now we can because what we know in the animated shows and in the comics, but at that moment, and Nick, I don't remember. I don't think it shows up in the trailer, but when we see for the first time
The
a
double
double
bladed. Yeah,
lightsaber,
that's incredible. That is a good
I think I
moment.
peed my pants. I mean,
And
it was
this
sort of like
and then well, the score of that moment really adds to the
well,
scene. Oh, it's
that
so incredible.
the music is fabulous.
Yeah,
The music is fabulous.
yeah,
I need to write about Star Wars music. I keep
yeah.
saying that and I don't do it. But it is quite marvelous to see that that moment when we have a double lightsaber,
Hmm.
because we've never seen one. We've
Right.
just never seen one.
He was the
Um,
start of all these cool modded lightsaber. Now we got double bladed. We got ones with
the
the
ones that bend back.
yeah. I mean, we got some that with the like the Inquisitors that spin. I mean,
Yeah.
he was the pioneer for all
Right.
those.
It's the beginning of a beautiful
This
development of lightsabers.
the
Yeah.
more we're talking, I didn't really realize this that Phantom Menace really does lay the groundwork for so much that comes after it. I didn't even
Yes.
really consider that until we
Oh
started
yes.
talking about it.
Oh yes.
How much is introduced in this movie and how much gets expanded upon later. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Absolutely. It just goes everywhere.
It opens the door for so much.
Opens multiple doors.
Yeah. Shall we talk about some of the ancillary media? I know we've touched on it a little bit here and
Sure.
there,
Sure. Go
but
go.
one I was thinking as we were talking, I remember one of the few Legends books that I read years ago at my local library was called Darth Maul Shadowhunter.
Never read that.
I believe it's by Michael Reeves. I could be
Okay.
wrong. Um, it's a very
I think I
fascinating
have
book
it. Yeah.
where it's a little misleading, but not completely. Maul is on the cover, Shadowhunter. I mean, we really don't get much about him, like his
Huh.
backstory or what he's doing. It takes place before the Phantom Menace, obviously.
Okay.
Uh, but this is more of like a monster hunt, like a slasher film, I guess you could say,
Oh,
where
weird.
Maul is playing the villain. He's the Jason, the Freddy Krueger,
Okay.
Michael Myers type, and
Okay.
you follow a Jedi and some pilot, and he's hunting them down because of information they know, and you kind of follow their point of view of how menacing this guy is and how terrifying he is, and how they have no idea who the hell he is and where he came from. But it's really fascinating.
Huh.
I don't remember the pilot or the Jedi's name, but
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
just a fascinating story because we kind of like Vader. He's more, the less he says, the cooler and the more intimidating he is.
I'm just trying to see here because there is in the new Legend series of new publications,
Hmm.
there is one Darth Maul novel.
Ah, there it is. That's the
It
one.
is Shadowhunter,
Michael. Yeah, that's the one.
Michael Reeves. So this is
Yeah, that's the
the new.
one.
I haven't read this one yet.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. I enjoyed it a lot.
Cool, cool,
But
cool.
yeah, and then the last few years we've gotten bombarded with like a Master and Apprentice, touches on Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan's relationship prior to Phantom Menace. Then we get to see Queen's Shadow, takes place, a
Yes,
couple years after Phantom Menace, and how Naboo is transitioning and
yes.
how Padme's transitioning to the Senate, and
Yep.
a lot of just fun ancillary stuff. And then
I love it.
the Incredible Tales of the Jedi short, which is probably one of my favorite things in animation the last few years, with Count Dooku and Yaddle, and kind of
Yes.
takes place during the movie, and oh, it's so beautiful.
And we mentioned the Darth Maul comics. There are
Yeah,
two series of those, and those are actually quite good. Son of Death,
yeah,
or one of them is called. But it's really interesting because it is also during Phantom Menace that you get this gigantic explosion of children's literature.
yeah.
And so there is just so much published through Scholastic. Not only the Jedi Apprentice, but there's there's a Padme Amidala diary. There are all of these things
Hmm.
that are being published at the time. So the beginning of what later will be YA novels, and middle graders
Hmm.
is something that really begins around this time. Once again, Phantom Menace is the beginning of another gigantic era of fiction for children that are really wonderful. Just because
Yeah,
they're kiddie,
it's
they're
nice.
they're powerful. The emotional punch of Jude Watson's novels. Do not underestimate the power of Jude Watson. That's all I have to
I
say.
will not.
You need to
You don't know the power.
oh, it's just incredible. They're just incredible. I'm just about to start another series that she started called Jedi Quest. That
Okay,
is about Anakin from being a kid to, I think, to Attack of the Clones.
awesome. Okay,
And those are I'm still collecting them. I have a few left that I don't own yet. And so I'm curious about reading those as
nice,
well. So,
very nice.
any final thoughts?
Just like this movie a lot. It's my favorite prequel. Um, hard to believe it's been 25 years. Doesn't feel like it. Kind of wild to think about.
Mm,
The movie still looks incredible, by the way. We haven't really talked about that, but
yeah, you're
for a
right.
movie that's 25 years old now, it's looks good. I mean, there's a lot of people complain that the prequels are overuse of CGI, but I think I read somewhere in an article that this movie used more practical effects than the entire original trilogy. So um,
Interesting.
yeah, and they did use
Interesting.
CGI obviously, but they blended it really well, and the whole pod racing with the audience and the that's all
Dun, dun, dun,
uh,
dun, 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 dun.
yeah,
I love that.
that's all model, that's not CGI, that's all a handmade practical set, and yeah, they just do really good. This movie looks gorgeous. The CGI still holds up.
I haven't seen it on a big screen in a
Haven't
very
either.
long time. I've seen it, but it's been a long time since I saw it on a big screen. So I don't know how it would look, but at least on my big screen in my living room, it looked beautiful. I was actually very aware of the CGI complaint, and I kept looking at the movie and thinking, it does not bother me.
Yeah,
It does not bother me.
I've
I
never.
I
That's one of the.
I would be curious to see it on a big screen to see if it's different, but I just And this is the last Star Wars movie to be filmed on film,
Right.
because Attack of the Clones is actually the very first digitally filmed film in Hollywood.
Hmm.
And so it would be interesting to see it on a big screen, because it was filmed on 35 millimeter rather than digitally. So that might make a difference.
Right.
But I had no trouble with the CGI
Yeah.
effects in the film.
Yeah.
At least not me.
Yeah. I was gonna say that's one of the. I do have a couple complaints about the movie, but that's definitely not one of them. The movie
No.
looks gorgeous. It looks and feels Star Wars. So much of it is
Yep.
just awesome.
Yep. Can you show off your t-shirt? Because we can only
Oh
see
yeah,
the
yeah.
top of it.
This is I
Look at
bought this.
that.
Yes. I don't know if this is a reference to some kind of famous artwork or what it is. I found it on Amazon. There was a big sale of shirts, and I thought, oh, I got to get this. I don't have an Amidala or anything Phantom Menace
It's
related
beautiful.
except this, but
Yeah,
it's an
I
awesome
have no
shirt.
prequel trilogy t-shirt, so I have to stick with my Star Wars Celebration.
Yeah,
And since this is when women are inserted in it, I thought Star Wars for Everyone is sort of
yeah,
made
yeah.
sense for this. So
It's for everybody.
all
Women,
right, it
Gungans,
is absolutely Gungans and all.
women's Gungans, and everybody.
All right, Nick, thank you so much. This was really, really fun. And it
Yeah,
was really interesting sort of to pause and think about Phantom Menace,
yeah.
and its importance in the whole saga and its importance in the whole franchise. Because there's a lot that happens, there's a lot that begins with
Mhm.
Phantom Menace. Happy anniversary. Happy birthday, Phantom Menace.
Happy
Happy
birthday.
25.
You can rent a car now.
There you go.
Your insurance is going to get lowered. So.
May the force be with you.